You have some exit strategies as well, but just remember that it is legally blinding, binding.
Right.
I hope it's not blinding to you. Legally binding and. Hello, everybody. This is Adriana Ostapenko from Ace Properties. I'm here with Thia Velinor. Thea and I met a little while back at the multifamily conference, I believe it was.
Yes.
We just had a really great conversation. We probably spent like right away almost an hour together talking and chatting about what you've been up to. Thea is in a lot of different things. I'll let her talk about some of this, but she's in wholesaling quite a bit and has been doing this for a while, has been, kicking butts and taking names in the wholesaling game with her team. I met some of her team members there as well. And then she's been getting into some vacation rentals and other things now. So here is a good friend, really leader in the real estate space. So we're excited to talk to her today. And we're going to get into a really interesting topic that came up in conversation with us, which is how do you send and fill out an APS? So this is an Ontario purchase for sale and agreement that gets sent to sellers of properties when you're putting offers on deals. She's an expert at doing that because of her wholesaling business. And she's here to talk to us about it and teach us how to do this and how to do it well. So I'll let Thea do a little introduction of herself.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much, Adriana. And thanks for having me and just, sitting down and having this convo today. You're right. Like filling out the APS has been such a hot topic. So many people reach out and they're like, how do you fill this out? Or do I need to have a realtor to do it? So I thought it was a good opportunity to, give some value back, right? It's not always about taking. So I'm happy to be here with you, especially and diving right into this APS and how to correctly fill them out. And as far as, a little bit about me, I really just entered the real estate space in June of 2020. I didn't know anything about filling out APS. I didn't know how to purchase a property or how I would even go about doing that. So I was brand new. I attended a free webinar that was teaching individuals how to get into the wholesaling space. They said you didn't need to have any money. I had $0. So I'm like, perfect. Let me attend and figure out how I'm going to do this. After that, a light bulb just kind of went off in my mind and I was like, I can do this. I'm doing it. And a month later, Velinor Properties was created. And that's in honor of my mom, who had passed away in February of 2020. Her last name is Velinor as well. So, from June of 2020 right on to December, I just really, was figuring out the fundamentals, the basics, and just how to go about getting a deal, analyzing the deal, the whole bit. So in December, I finally got my first deal done. It did take me 6 months. So, it's not this overnight success story that some people really dream about having. You really have to, put your best foot forward every single day and dig into it. And it's not easy, especially if you're not seeing any results, right? Or you're seeing results in the sense that you're becoming more comfortable in filling out a document, speaking to a seller, speaking to a realtor, but it's not producing any money, right? So for us, it feels like nothing is happening. So I got that deal done at the tail end of 2020. 2021, I just kind of took off, got 6 deals done, and then started figuring out how am I going to build a team, because I definitely cannot do this volume by myself. It was so stressful. So, fast forward, maybe 6 months into 2021, a really good friend of mine, he's like a brother. He left his full-time job, joined my team, and we then just started building, some processes, some systems, met some more people along the way, brought them in, and we grew the team till now. We have 8 wholesalers as well as a virtual assistant who is so lovely from the Philippines. She just does phenomenal for us. So that's super exciting. And, being a wholesaler, I obviously, perfected the skill in finding the leads. So my next thing was, well, how am I going to acquire properties? And because I'm finding these deals, I was able to leverage that and be able to own 17 doors within the first 4 months of 2021 without putting any money in. I just found the deals. And then if we fast forward again, a few months later, I'm sitting at 66 doors now in the last year and a half. So super excited about the 39 unit building that'll be closing on the 14th of this month. And we've also launched our Stellar Stays B&B business, which is an Airbnb. We do property Airbnb management, as well as we have some of our own properties as well. And you talked about the destination villas or whatnot. We're now getting into that space in Punta Cana. We're looking at some villas that we're likely going to go ahead and close in on. So I'm super excited about that, because who doesn't want a villa in a tropical place? Like, I think everybody at some point has that on their whiteboard or their list, right? So I'm super excited. And I feel like I'm just getting started since I'm only 2 years in. So I'm like, let's go. What do we have next, right? So I'm excited.
That's so amazing, Thea. I love that story. Congratulations on everything, all your success. I can very much relate to this story. When you said like you're working, you don't seem, I'm like, this is kind of like, feels like going to the gym. I just started going to the gym again. I'm like, damn it, where are the results? Takes time, consistency, to see it, but then you do. And that's amazing. Congratulations. Very exciting.
Thank you.
Agreement of purchase for sale is unique to every province. Is that correct? And we're going to be going over on Ontario one, because I know we have properties in New Brunswick and it looks quite different. So the first time when I saw that, it was a little shocking just how different it was. But this is an Ontario one, so this is going to be good stuff. There's lots of homes to buy in Ontario.
So the agreement of purchase and sale document, essentially you're going to use this anytime you personally want to submit an offer to a seller directly. Keep in mind, this is the same document that your realtor, so if you're putting in an offer through something that you found on realtor.ca, this is the document that the realtor is going to be filling out if you're in Ontario. So super standard form. I'm just going to go over exactly how myself and my team completes and fills out these documents. I've been doing this almost every day for the last 2 years. So I'm pretty well versed on, how to get this done correctly.
I guess I'm just going to explain as well that I think part of the reason why we're going over this is you can actually submit one of these yourself. As the buyer, you can actually submit an offer. Obviously, I think a majority of people use realtors to do this type of work for them. But if you're doing this as a business and you're submitting, dozens a week, which realtor wants to do it that way, right? So you do need kind of an in-house person just to submit offers. And as a buyer, you have the right to do that. So she's giving us the valuable tools of how to submit some of these offers yourself.
Exactly. As you can see, the first line, it says this agreement of purchase and sale dated. So you're going to put the day, the numbered day. So today would be the 10th day of August. I'm not sure if you can fill some of that in or if we need to, if it's more helpful. But otherwise, it's just really the date. So this agreement of purchase and sale dated this 10th day of August, and then you're going to include the year 2022. Buyer, you're going to put your name. If you have a corporation or a numbered corp, then that's what you'll use. If you are looking to potentially assign this deal, I think regardless, everyone should really just put and or assignee. That way you always have options. There's flexibility, right? It's not just in your name. They are aware that you may be assigning this to another investor, or it might be transferred over to a corporation at a later date. So I'm typically putting in my company name, which would be Velinor Properties, Inc., and or assignee. And then continues on, agrees to purchase from, and now we're going to have the seller's full legal name. So you want to always ensure that when you're putting in an offer, you are one, asking the seller personally what is their name, first and last name, but also you want to double check or cross-reference that against what we call a geo warehouse. And the geo warehouse will provide you with some more details about the property. So, and it'll come up in this document as well, but it will confirm the seller's first and last name, or if it's in a corporation, it'll have that as well. It'll let you know how much the seller purchased this property for, which is also very, very helpful when you're going to negotiate. You're able to see like, okay, this was purchased maybe 20 years ago for $30,000. So, chances are this property is owned, of course, outright. And now it allows you to be more flexible, more creative in coming up with an offer and a deal that you want to present to the seller.
So tell me a little bit about Geo. Can you tell me do you know what the link is off the top of your head?
For Geo Warehouse, that is only access through a realtor. So you'll need to have a realtor either, on your team or a realtor that you work with. But you'll need someone who is a realtor to be able to provide that information for you. And it's also important because there's other components on this document that we're going to see that the information is available on Geo Warehouse on that document. So then we're going to go
warehouse correctly here.
That's right.
Okay, perfect.
That is correct. And
I did have a question about the buyer. So you briefly mentioned, I also always do or assigned. Reason being, for our multifamily buildings, normally when we're purchasing it, we are going to open a unique corporation that's going to hold title on that building. Right. So I already know we're going to have to change the name of the buyer. Sellers normally know that as well, and they're okay with that. Right. I find on the residential side, sometimes I found some resistance as opposed to the commercial side. Do you find that sellers sometimes are resistant to the or assigned clause?
I feel earlier into my real estate journey, I was getting sometimes a bit of a pushback, and even like the odd time now, they'd be like, well, why do you want it? Why do you want to have the assigned in there? But I think once you explain to them your reasoning, it makes perfect sense. As you said, it's the ability to also transfer this into, a corporation at a later date. So I'm always telling them when I'm purchasing these properties, I'm not keeping any of these properties in my active business. We will be, creating a corporation in the event that we're going to go through and lift the conditions and go firm and say we're going to keep this property. So once I let them know that, it makes sense. And they're more times than not always okay with proceeding with the and or assign.
Awesome. And then another quick question is, I get that question a lot from people, and I know it varies, but I wanted to get your opinion on it. Mm-hmm. Do you suggest that buyers buy within a company or on their personal name?
I think it would really depend on the strategies that you're utilizing. You could totally purchase it in your own name. I know some people do that, and sometimes they want to utilize the first-time home buyer's credit. So it really depends. But if you're looking to do this as a business full-time, you will most likely want to purchase or rather, create a corp or a numbered corp, because you don't want to have all of these assets under your personal name.
Awesome. Thank you. Also, people, we suggest that you check in with your lawyer and your accountant for the best structure and advice. Neither Thea or I are accountants or lawyers here or realtors. So this is our experience, and please go get some legal advice on your situation there. All right. So then we move on to the real property piece here.
Yes. So the address, we're going to put the physical address. I always include, so if it was 123 Fate Street, Toronto, Ontario, I'm going to also include the postal code. So whatever that postal code is, M12, M13, I always include it there. That way there's no there's no, confusions in terms of, is it for this city? Because often a lot of cities might have the same name. So just to make sure it's crystal clear for everybody, I'm always including and having the address look exactly like that. Now, moving on to fronting on the, you're going to then go to Google and you're simply just going to type in the address. So we probably should have used the real address then. You're going to type in the address in Google and you're going to see where on the map that street, the property is fronting. So if it was fronting, let's say this, if you can see if this makes sense, this is Fake Street and the property is here. It would be fronting on the south side. And then that's what we're going to say. So fronting on the south and then side of that next bullet there. So we're, exactly right there. South side of Fake Street.
Okay, perfect. I did not know that.
Yeah. So even south would be on that side as well.
Right here. You would put it right there. So what are you putting on that first one? You just put.
Oh, I apologize. Yes. So it'd be fronting on the, you were right initially. So it is south and then side of, my apologies, Fake Street.
Perfect.
So you're always going to put city of Toronto or whatever that city is.
Yeah. Just for our example here, this is in the city of Toronto. Right. This is another interesting one, which it's usually the size of the lot, correctly? Is that correct?
That's correct, which is also located on the Geo Warehouse document. And that is why it's very important to get access to either a Geo Warehouse or there's, I believe, another document that's escaping me for some reason as well. But Geo is really our go-to when we're filling them out. It'll have all of this stuff so you can correctly and appropriately fill out the form.
I thought there was a service that you could purchase or like pay monthly that you can access some of this information. I'm not 100% sure. So
I'm not entirely sure. I haven't heard of a paid service where you can find this. But I know Purview as well. That's the one I was thinking of, is another document that you could pull up, PUR. And that'll have this info as well. And again, those are both accessed by realtors.
Okay, perfect.
And then the depth of that will be, again, on the Geo Warehouse, and it'll be a number. So it might, look like 96.32 feet.
And then legally described as?
Again, on the Geo Warehouse, it'll have the legal description, which is like a thumbprint for every property. So super important as well. That way there's no discrepancies between
what would be, do you have in top of mind what would be a description?
It's usually something odd, like it'll just have a bunch of letters. It'll probably say Toronto in there. It'll have some numbers. It's really just a combination of the two. And it might be like PL, semicolon. They're all just weird, funky layouts.
So how do you get access to your warehouse? Do you work with a realtor on this piece?
I do. I have a few realtors because if you want to be a wholesaler, you definitely need to have great relationships with realtors in different cities. I'm fortunate enough that I have a relative who's also a realtor in Ontario. So anytime I'm filling out an offer, he's who I call and he'll send it over to me.
Fantastic. And I guess the same thing. Oh, it's the same legally described as. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, because sometimes they're long. It could be one line. Sometimes you have to shrink it because it's like 4 lines. It almost looks like a mini paragraph. So that's why they provided the 2 lines there.
It says here it would also include easements. So that's interesting. That could get long. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And then we're on to purchase price, which is pretty straightforward. You're going to go and put in the numerical value of your offer. So if it's 500,000, that's what we're putting there. And then we're going to actually write out in letters, 500 or words rather, 500,000. And you don't have to put dollars because it's already there on the document. Now we are at the deposit. So buyer submits and you're always going to put upon acceptance. So once your offer is accepted, you are expected within 24 hours, as it says just under it, to put that deposit in either your lawyer's trust, which we'll get to that line. I always try to put it into the lawyer's trust because I've just had some issues in the past where I've waited a year chasing my deposit back from a seller's lawyer. That's not fun. Some I haven't even gotten back yet. So it's just, I mean, it's easier to obviously get money back from your lawyer if the deal doesn't go to close. But I find that when that does happen and the seller's lawyer has it, sometimes there's no urgency around it. They'll give it to you eventually, but they don't have any urgency. So you want to always—
Interesting and very good tip.
Yeah, you want to always try to put in your own lawyer's trust.
In terms of the deposit, so here you would put a dollar amount of deposit. What is a good amount for deposits? Like, is there a percentage that you go off of? Like, how do you decide how much you're putting down on deposit?
Less is best, I always say, because I don't want to tie up a ton of capital. I'm putting out offers every single day. So for me, my standard go-to is $500. And I'm going to put $500 every time unless they say something. And sometimes they will. And then at that point, we'll have a conversation around. I'll let them know, like, this is what I do on a day-to-day, every single day. So if I'm putting $15,000 every day on a deposit, it's going to be really hard for me to run my business. And for them, that makes sense. So, you know, if they push back on the 500 and they say, you know, we want 5,000, I might be like, okay, well, I'm willing to put maybe 2,000. Or, you know, what I've done in the past, they wanted 10,000. I said, you know what, I'm willing to do 2,500 now. If we lift the conditions, I'll then put an additional 2,500. So I'll have a tiered deposit. So at least it's showing, you know, good faith in the sense that, of course, I want the deal. If we're lifting conditions, I'll put more money. But, you know, they can definitely appreciate that in order for me to run my business, I can't be putting out $20,000 deposits daily.
So this is a really good point. I believe we have negotiated every single deposit that, you know, every single property we purchase, we always negotiate. We do a similar strategy. We start lower, you know, sometimes they push back, often they push back. We like compromise somewhere in the middle, go a little bit higher, but ultimately we're always trying to do the least amount possible for the same reason. Sure. So that's great.
Absolutely.
And this was the spot where you said would be lawyer's trust, right?
That's correct. So check payable to, and if you have a lawyer, you're going to put your lawyer's name and in trust. So if it was, you know, Ronald McDonald in trust, that's how you want it to read. And again, you want to always do that on every single offer unless they push back and say, I want it in the lawyer's trust or their lawyer's trust. And if they also want an increased deposit and in their lawyer's trust, for me, that's room for negotiation. So maybe I'm willing to increase it, but I'm going to share my story about how it took me over a year to get my money back. And I have no problems now putting 5,000 in there, but I want it to go to my lawyer. And that has worked many times as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I walked away from a deal once because the seller wanted, first of all, a very large deposit. We were in a competition situation.
Right.
And he wanted sent to his personal, like, corporate account.
Oh no.
And I'm like, what? Like, doesn't sound correct to me. Like, you want how much in your personal corporate bank account? No.
Yeah, I would walk away as well. Right.
All right.
So perfect. That's what goes there. And just under it, it's essentially highlighting that this deposit should be in there in your lawyer's trust or the seller's lawyer's trust within that 24-hour period from the acceptance, rather.
Awesome. So is this, okay, yes, it's already sitting there. Perfect. I find this also interesting, just as a point of comparison. New Brunswick is quite different, and it's very common to only give your deposit after you've met conditions on a property.
Ooh, I like that.
That is very nice. It definitely allowed us to do a lot more offers. So that was a nice change in pace out there.
Right. And I'll often tell sellers too, when they do want larger deposits, I'm like, you do realize it only sits in the lawyer's trust account. No one has access to it. If we don't, lift conditions, we get the deposit back, because sometimes they think they get the money. And that's why, you know, they want this large deposit. So it's always good just to give them a little education around that. And sometimes they're like, well, okay, I'm okay with, you know, a smaller deposit since it's just sitting in the lawyer's trust anyway.
That's a very good point. I love that. Education is key in almost anything you do.
Exactly. And then we're going to go down to the irrevocability component. So essentially, this offer shall be irrevocable by you're submitting the offer, so you are the buyer. So you're going to put buyer in there. And irrevocability essentially is when will this offer expire? So if the offer is not signed by the date and time that we're going to outline here, which I typically put at 6 p.m. So if people are at work, at least they have some time to get home. So I'll put 6 p.m. in there.
And then is this the date here?
Right. And you're doing the exact same thing again on the. So I typically will give the irrevocable period because, you know, for the wholesaling business, typically the next day. I want them to feel some sense of urgency instead of being like, well, you have 7 days to get back. I mean, now they're dragging their feet. There's more time for another potential buyer to come in and swipe that deal from you. So I want them to feel the urgency. I want them to know you need to respond by tomorrow at 6 p.m. So typically it's 1 day for me.
Like a 24-hour period.
Exactly. Unless otherwise specified by them, like, oh, I need my lawyer to, you know, have a look. I'm going to need, you know, X amount of days. Then I'll do that. Otherwise, I'm typically going with a 24-hour turnaround.
Awesome.
And then the completion date is the date that the property will close. So whatever works for you, that is what I'm going to go with. Always a closing date that works for me. So if I have 5 closings at the end of this month, I'm probably not going to go for August. I'll likely, you know, push that to maybe September, October. So super flexible there, unless again, the seller has stated it needs to close on this particular day.
Awesome. Let's talk about closing dates for a second, because that was one of the questions that I had for you. How do you decide, do you have a go-to preferred timeline between purchase and closing, or it's really negotiable? It's really up in the air depending on the deal.
It's really negotiable. But if I'm filling these out as a wholesaler or for my wholesaling business, I want to give people time to get their ducks in a row. Unless it is, you know, a situation where the seller's super motivated and we need to close in 3 weeks. Otherwise, I'm typically going to go with, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Out for a closing, but typically 6 to 8 weeks is what I like.
What is the shortest closing you've done?
That was probably 3 weeks, and that was interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because it was the time that we had, you know, got the deal under contract. Then we have to get photos, and like we have to go through our process as a business, and then market the deal, find an investor to purchase the deal. And then they have maybe 2 weeks to close now. So it's really a condensed period, but it's not impossible. But definitely whoever your end buyer is going to be, they need to have, you know, their ducks in a row. I don't want to hear that they're just starting a mortgage process, or, you know, you want to make sure that this person is ready to pull the trigger.
That's awesome. This is one of the things I like about multifamily. It's a slower pace. It still feels crazy. Don't get me wrong. Like the last 2 weeks, you're like getting it all, you know, there's still a lot of moving pieces.
Right.
But I prefer 90-day close, and it gives me time to get it all together. So, yeah.
And then you as the buyer are going to initial in that bubble there. So if you're using a DocuSign, you would click initial. And if you're purchasing with a partner, you'd of course have whoever's name is stated in the agreement as the buyer. Those are the people that are needing to sign this document here with their initials. And then the sellers will sign that other bubble that the arrow is now pointed in.
Perfect. So I was going to ask, I saw that you use DocuSign yourself.
I do, yes.
Fill this in. It's obviously a very popular software for online signature. I myself use HelloSign, which is very similar concept. But then you would, you know, send this document to both you and the seller. for e-signature. So you need the seller's email to make sure that this documents gets to them for them to read and sign.
Exactly. And I don't know if HelloSign is the same, but what I like is that we can also send it directly to the lawyer. So it saves some time in them having to print the document and then having to maybe fax it or email it over. We can actually CC the lawyer right on the DocuSign. So they get a copy, they can review, edit, and then have it sent back to us with any counters that they might have.
Certainly, very helpful option there.
This is really saying is that so you mentioned that we'll need an email address. So we're going to put the seller's email address in the left, exactly right there. And then you're going to put your own email address. So this is where all the documents are going to be sent to. So seller's email address there, buyer's on the other. And it's just as good as, this document being hand delivered. It is the same. And that's how it's viewed. So you want to make sure you have the email address correct. And just know that all further communication pertaining to this deal for both seller and buyer, they're going to use this email address that's on the document.
Awesome. Fax numbers, is that still a thing?
No. Oh gosh, no, I hope not. I've never filled out a fax number. It's always just been email, which is just so much better. And then we move on to the shadows that are included. So a lot of people are like, what's a shadow? What is that? It really is anything that can be removed from the property without creating any damage or anything like that. So, something like a washer, dryer, a fridge, a stove, those would be the shadows.
Do you actually fill this piece out a lot on your?
So I will typically say all existing unless they say otherwise. So I'm typically saying all existing shadows.
That's what you would normally write down on yours.
I would.
Okay.
And sometimes they'll ask you to be more specific, and then you'll have to highlight exactly what you're referring to. So always fridge and stove, because who wants to buy a new one when you get a property? We want to try to get the existing. So fridge, stove, dishwasher, though, like I said, washer, dryer, those kind of things. But if you just put all existing, it really is like a bubble and it includes everything. And we actually got a few fridge and stove that way. So I was like, no, I didn't want to. So I was like, well, the agreement says, and I'm open to, I don't want to lock anybody into something or be sneaky, but then we need to readjust the price because I'm, of course, now going to have to purchase a fridge and a stove. So I leave that option up to them. And then we get down to the fixtures excluded. I'm typically leaving that blank. I don't typically put in anything unless the seller has specifically mentioned something. And a fixture is something that is attached to the property. So something like a cupboard set, maybe a chandelier, a particular light like pot lights, or something of the sort, that would be a fixture.
Got it. So usually it would be something the seller would want to bring up as opposed to you worrying about filling.
Yeah, we want the chandelier, of course.
Anything you want to leave, we'll take it.
Exactly. Number 6 is the rental item. So this is very important because we want to know, does the seller have any rental items that would include a hot water tank, an air conditioner, a furnace. So I'm typically doing a balloon type of remark in there, and I'm saying hot water tank or hot water tank if applicable. So you can also put in your hot water tank, your furnace, just to really cover yourself, air conditioner, those type of things. And sometimes they'll push back and be like, I own everything, please remove it. No problem. You can go back, remove it because they own all the items. But you want to ensure that, if there is any rental items, it's captured in the agreement here.
Do you have, just like you said, you have a specific phrase that you normally put in here that generalizes it?
I say, I put hot water tank if applicable.
So this is interesting. I recently spoke, I have a realtor that's a really good friend of mine. And we were just having lunch recently. He happened to mention a sticky situation like that led to a lawsuit in a
Oh
small
no.
scale over
Okay.
this rental item thing because the buyers bought the property and did not know that it was either the furnace in the hot water tank or one or the other. I don't fully remember. Um,
Right.
Ended up being a rental, and it was not disclosed here. And then it became a he said, she said situation. And the buyers were like, hey, we want 20 grand because we thought that was included and it's not. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it became a really thing, a situation. The realtor was just trying to like, okay, I will take the money, like I'll chalk up as he's like, so it interesting.
Yeah.
It's good to make sure that this is in there.
And I actually have a clause that we'll see later. Well, I guess you won't see it, but I'll read it out to you, or maybe I can send that over to you, Adriana, that'll cover what goes in there. But I can also just read it out to you so that way you don't get into these potential, legal situations.
That's awesome.
It kind of covers that as well.
Good to know there's clauses to protect you from this. Awesome.
Absolutely. And then we move down to number 7, HST. So on anything that is not considered a commercial property, so typically like 5 units and under, and I know 5 units could be depending on the lender. So let's say 4 units and under for sure, HST will be included. So I'm typically putting in included in. And then you can see if it was if it wasn't, or if it was a commercial, there is another agreement for that as well. If you're going to purchase commercial buildings, but you can also use this document as well. And you would just say in addition to, but for this sake, let's say it's a single family, it would be included in the purchase price, the HST. So whatever that price is, or whatever your offer is, it already includes the HST. It's not going to be an additional tax on top of that. And then again, we're going to put our initials down at the bottom, and the seller will sign over to the right side there.
Awesome.
Number 8, so title search. They typically allow up until 6 p.m. And again, it's the same format I'm typically giving, so that's anywhere between 1 to 4 weeks from the closing date. So feel free to pick some time in there.
Makes sense. So usually the lawyer does this process in closing. Is that correct?
That's right. Your lawyer will do it.
We just want to give ourselves as much time as possible to be able to carry through with the due diligence of closing, which would include the title search.
Exactly. Well, then we'll get to the work orders for deficiency, which still falls under the title search. It could be legally zoned a duplex, but they're using it as a single family, or maybe it was a duplex and they reconverted into, a single family. We're going to put single family, like residential single family dwelling.
Whatever the current use of the property is, regardless of its official description.
Exactly.
Perfect.
And all of this verbiage here, it's super standard. I would just encourage everyone to read through it. It's just really digging more into the title searches and what they're going to be looking for, the closing arrangements, discussing, what your lawyer's components will be, and all of those things. So initial at the bottom of the document.
I think something we mentioned earlier as well, just to remind everybody, this is a legally binding document that you are signing. That's why there's standard clauses in here. So when you do submit an offer, you are legally bound to see that through. And if it gets accepted, then you have legal obligations to follow whatever this agreement says, or there could be legal consequences to it as well, which I just mentioned, something like, these kinds of, so it is important to make sure you're filling out this correctly. If you're doing it for the first time, maybe consult a lawyer and just understand all the clauses in here, these standard clauses, so that you're prepared and you know what you're signing and sending over. Like Thea said, nothing to be scared of. This is why we're teaching you. This is why she's teaching you what clauses to put in here to protect yourself and make sure that You have some exit strategies as well, but just remember that it is legally binding, binding.
Right.
I hope it's not blinding to you. Legally binding, and it's important for you to know what you're getting into.
Absolutely. Item 28. So successors and assigned. So essentially, this is where you are going to, as the buyer, sign that top on that dotted line there. You'll put your signature. And when I'm using DocuSign, I'm putting a signature tab there. Just under the dotted line to the right, I'm also including my name. So just no cursive writing, just Thia Velinor. So they know who has signed the signature, because it's not always legible. So that way it's super clear. You sign. So yep, that line would be a signature. Right under, you would put your first and last name.
Okay.
And then you're going to date the day that you have filled out and signed this agreement.
Awesome. Do you need a witness?
You don't. You actually don't. But if you wanted to include one, great. But you definitely don't need one there. And moving on to the under where it says witness. So we have seller. You're going to have the seller do exactly what you did. Put their name, have a signature, their name, and they're going to date it as well. And if they're married and they appear on title, so when you pulled that Geo Warehouse, if you've seen two names there, both of those people are going to be required to not only initial the document, but also sign and put their name there as well. And then the other seller exactly would go on the other tab. And so the spousal consent is interesting because that threw me off for a long time. And what that really is if you, let's say the seller is common law. So this person is their spouse is not on title, but they're still recognized as, common law married. This person would then include their name, their signature, name, and they would date as well. Alternatively, if the seller owns this property maybe before they got married. So again, their spouse is not on title, but they are legally married, then this is where you're going to put their spouse's name. It wouldn't be under seller, like above that, unless they were both on title.
That's interesting. Do you run into that quite a bit?
Only, I think once or twice. So not very common. And then confirmation of acceptance, because we are the ones sending out this offer as the buyer. This is going to be the seller to sign. So the seller would then put the time. So if they signed it at, it's 6/19 now, they'd put 6/19 on this 10th day of August, 2022. And then they would go ahead and sign where it says signature of seller or buyer. But in this case, it'd be the seller.
So they would sign it. They don't have to see that they're the seller here.
Yep. Perfect. So we don't have to worry about information on brokerages because we are submitting this offer directly to the seller ourselves.
Okay, so we can skip this portion here.
Correct.
And then we go to acknowledgements.
So acknowledgements is where you're going to highlight your lawyer as the buyer. So we're going to put under buyer, for instance, I would put, Thia Velinor. I would date it. I would sign as well. Or sorry, I wouldn't put a signature, but I would put my name. I'd put the date. I would then put buyer's lawyer's name. So first and last name, the address of where the lawyer's office is, their email address, and your lawyer's office's telephone number.
Address for service, that's your address?
Right, but I don't ever put my address in, so we can actually leave that blank.
And we would just do name, date.
Yeah, just name and
phone
date.
Number.
I don't put my phone number. You could, up to you, but you don't really need to.
Okay, perfect. And then buyer's lawyer's name.
Correct.
Do you send over more information on the lawyer side?
I do. So on the buyer's lawyer, I'm just putting in my lawyer's first and last name, his property or his office's address, his email address, and his phone number. Okay. Which is likely the office phone number.
And then for the seller, on the seller side, what happens?
We're going to leave that. So when using, I'm sure HelloSign is the same. DocuSign, I'm putting little tabs so they can actually manually insert that information themselves.
So seller will fill out and you put on everything.
Right. So I'll put the tab for seller's name and the date. And I actually do typically sign. So when I'm just recapping, because it's like second nature now. So it's like strange that we're typing it out. But I will put a signature tab for the seller and their name, similar to what we did above. But the seller will complete the lawyer's name. So there's a tab where they can insert lawyer's name, address, email address, telephone number.
Got it. Okay. Perfect.
And then we're scrolling down. We're getting to the fun stuff.
So for commission trust agreements, do you have anything? Do you put anything in there? That's a realtor thing?
Nope. That's another realtor thing. So I'm typically just putting NA in these fields, not applicable. And then here kind of resembles the first page that we started with. You're going to, again, put your name and or assignee, and you'll have the seller's name as well. And then again, you're going to include the property address for the purchase and sale of.
Same thing we did above there.
Right.
And then we get into some
And then
clauses.
The property address would go in there. And then we'll date the exact same way, dated the 10th day. So we're for the purchase and sale of, we'd again put 123 Fake Street, and it would have the postal code and all of that.
And we'll date just the same, 10th of August, 2022.
Correct. And then here, this is where all the magic happens. This is what is going to allow you to exit this agreement, since, as we've said a few times, that it is a legally binding contract. This gives you the opportunity to exit the deal and not be held legally responsible. So essentially, these are your exit clauses that you're going to use. Now, when I'm, doing an APS, so agreement of purchase and sale for my wholesaling business, I like to keep it very clean. I don't want to clutter it because we've got a lot of deals that way. They're just like, your offer is easy to read. I'm gonna go with this, because others are like pages and pages. And I've made that mistake before. I put in so many clauses and they're just like, I'm confused by all of this. I don't even want to bother. Yeah. So you want to try to not clutter it, but still protect yourself. And that is the most important component. Adriana, I also sent you an email of some of the clauses.
Yeah, I'm going to open that up because I'm sure we all want to see it. There we go. And let me just, okay. Can you see my screen with the clauses?
I can. Perfect. So all of our offers are essentially going to have pretty much the same jargon. And I'm sure, Adriana, all of your offers that you put out pretty much starts the same way, with the buyer agrees to pay the balance of the purchase price subject to adjustments to the seller on completion of this transaction, with funds drawn on a lawyer's trust account in the form of a bank draft, certified check, or wire transfer using the large value transfer system. So that's super standard. And that's what will definitely be in every single agreement or offer that you're putting out. But as far as the clauses go, this is what Adriana has on her screen here.
So for those that just maybe have just missed that, Thea just read the clause that she uses that goes right here. This is where, is that correct, Thea? That would be like,
yeah,
first.
Yeah, it's the first thing that you'll see in every single offer. It's not so much an escape clause, but more so just letting
explanation of like how this transaction is going to happen.
Yes, and that you will get it by certified check or wire. So that's exactly what I was highlighting.
Awesome. If you missed that, make sure to pause, rewind, listen again.
Yeah.
She just read the clause there, and you guys can take notes on that. So let's talk about, so these are some of the other clauses that would go on that Schedule A. Let's talk about those for a second. What's the first one here?
So the seller represents and warrants that the shadows and fixtures as included in the agreement of purchase and sale will be in good working order and free from all lien and encumbrances on completion. Seller further permits the buyer and or buyer's home inspector to take photos of the appliance and shadows included in the purchase price. So especially if we're looking at, multi-families, or even if it's just single families, we want to make sure that, we are aware of whether or not these appliances work. It doesn't make sense to inherit your fridge and stove if they don't work. We're going to then have to purchase a new fridge and stove. So it's not like we're going to walk away from the deal if that's the case, but maybe we're going to knock the price down by a few thousand to account for these new appliances that we're now going to have to purchase. So we want to put that in there just to kind of protect and ensure that there also isn't any lien. So we had talked about whether or not there was some outstanding, like the furnace or rental equipment like a hot water tank. Is this a rental? Are there liens against it? Because if it is a rental, there's going to be liens. It's tied to the property. So we include this so we can protect ourselves and, just be in the know on what is owned and what's not owned when it comes to these shops.
That's a very good point. I went through an experience. We sold a couple of our fourplexes last year. And one of the buildings, we literally had purchased it 6 months before we sold it to somebody else. So we were still getting a handle of everything. And towards closing already, I get a call from my lawyer and says, hey, there's a lien on your property here. And the buyer wants that cleared out before sale completes. And I'm like, a lien? That's strange. Like, there's nothing that we own on it. And she's like, my guess, it's a furnace. And that's what it was. It was a furnace that we were renting and had the lien on it. And we settled that with the furnace company before it closed and offered them the certificate of clearance there. So
perfect. Exactly. So this little blurb here, it'll help protect you from those instances. So you definitely want to include them. Then we move on to the next clause that we use, which is the seller confirms that there is no outstanding litigation or claim against the property from any third party, including tenant and or any outstanding landlord-tenant board claims or landlord claims against the tenant and or any tenant defaults. The seller further agrees that all tenants are in good standing with their lease agreement payment and terms and conditions. That should be in conditions, but sometimes it does wonky things and changes the word there, but that is and conditions. So this is important, especially if you're looking at, multifamily, right? So even if it's a triplex, it doesn't have to be a huge building, but even a triplex, we want to make sure that the tenants are in good standing. It's one thing to have a conversation with the seller and they say, oh yeah, no, everybody,
they always say
that. No problems, never missed the payment. And then you close and you're like, they haven't paid in 9 months. Well, they could be like, well, we did tell you that. But now once you have it in this legally binding contract and they sign it, they have to stand on what they've signed. So in the event now that you go ahead and move forward to closing and then realize this person is in arrears, you can actually reach out to your lawyer and that lawyer will reach out to the seller's lawyer and that would have to be settled because, they weren't truthful, right? So you want to make sure you're protecting yourself. And that could also just have the whole deal crumble because that's not what you signed up for, right? So it's a very, very helpful clause. And I think everybody should use it, even if it's a single family with an existing tenant that you're going to inherit. We want to make sure that they've paid. Sellers, I haven't really encountered it much, but not everybody tells the truth, right? We're all human. And sometimes they're just not completely forthright because they want to sell, their property sometimes. So it's up to us to perform the due diligence and ensure that we're protecting our own selves.
I do find, so first of all, I'm not sure I have seen this clause before. So it's a really incredible one to have. In my experience, sellers are never 100% truthful. Sometimes it's ignorance too, they're not on purpose, but just they don't know or misunderstand, whatever. But it's, they're trying to sell. So there's always a little bit of embellishment in what they're selling. And what I find that this would be helpful in is, if you do find out that there is something wrong, they've agreed to this. Now you find out that there is, a claim or a tenant's not paying, you can circle back. And one is, pull out as a condition. This is one of your possible exits right here. If you don't want to take over the problem they're facing, you could go back and renegotiate the price of getting that, dealing with a tenant situation. So it will give you some options if you have this in place. So I love it.
Yeah. And it's all about having the options and the flexibility. So for sure, always use this. I highly recommend. And moving on to the next clause, which is the buyer shall have the right at any time prior to closing to assign the within offer to any person, persons, or corporation, either existing or to be incorporated, and upon delivery to the seller of notice of such assignment, together with the assignee's covenant in favor of the seller to be bound hereby as the buyer herein before named shall stand released from all further liability hereunder. What this basically just said is you have the right to assign this agreement. So yes, we're also including, the Thia Velinor and or assignee, but this clause is also very, very important. If you plan to assign this deal, or that you're gonna, change this over to a numbered corp or a corporation that you have, include the clause. That way the seller is in the know as to what the potentials are moving forward. Like, you might assign it. Yes, you said it in the name field there as the buyer, but super important to include it in your Schedule A as well. And what this is saying is you can assign this deal prior to close. And in the event that the assignee doesn't close on the property, you are removed or released from liability. So you will not be sued in the event that the seller, that your assignee doesn't close on the property. And sometimes you get some pushback because they don't like that sometimes, right? They might be like, well, we might go through this entire process and then, it might be for naught if your assignee doesn't decide to close. And I'm actually dealing with this right now. So what I personally do is I'll remove shall stand released from all further liability, and then insert that the buyer agrees to pay the seller maybe $5,000 or $10,000 in the event that the assignee doesn't close on the property. So again, still giving yourself an out for much less in the event that they still, even though you have this clause that says you're removed or released from liability, they can still try to come after you. They can try. So just to avoid all of the headache, I think, if they give some pushback, just offer them a little cash. For them, they might make $5,000 or $10,000 and they still have their property. So it's a win. It's a win for you because you don't have to deal with further litigation potentially, and a win for them because they made some cash and they still have an asset.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's interesting. I was going to ask you, out of curiosity, do the sellers know that you're a wholesaler and you will be, assigning, or do you not have that conversation with them?
I don't have that conversation, and it's not to be sneaky. It's because I find just human nature. We're afraid of what we don't understand. So if I'm telling you I'm interested in your property, but I might find another investor who's going to buy it. They're going to it just, if they don't understand how wholesaling works, or, the fact that it is completely legal, it just might raise unnecessary red flags. And anytime I'm entering into an agreement, as everybody should, the intention should be to close on the deal. Whether you're going to close or you're hoping to find, an assignee who's going to close, always enter all of these agreements in good faith. And I think that really goes a long way. So I don't disclose it because realistically, I don't know if I'm going to assign it or not. I mean, there's deals that I plan to wholesale and then I've kept. So, I mean, I don't want to, open an unnecessary can of worms that is going to make someone feel uncomfortable because they don't really understand.
Out of curiosity, do you, just because I have gone to take a look at a wholesaler's properties before, and the way they've structured that is they will do a one-time viewing for any interested buyers. Do you do that with your sellers? And then what do you tell them if you do that?
We absolutely do. but not one-off appointments, because I've been burned that way. It only takes me one time to learn. So one time there was an interested buyer, and this was when I first got started trying to get my first deal done. I drove all the way to Leamington, and I live in Toronto, so that's pretty much Windsor. For those of you who know, that's a far drive for this one gentleman. He was a no-show. So I showed up at the property, I burned a visit, and he didn't show up. I was like, I'm never doing one-off appointments again. So unless I have, history with this buyer, like we've done many deals together, am I more likely to be like, okay, if he's going to go and see it or she's going to go and see it, 9 out of 10 times they're really interested in the property. Other than that, I'm not doing that. But if I am hosting a walkthrough, I'm essentially letting the seller know that I do have a couple of my partners who want to walk through the property and have a look. And that's how I'm referring to the potential investor who may purchase the deal. They are partners. And I mean, it's really not a lie, because if they go ahead and purchase the deal, there's a partnership that was created. We've just done a deal together, right? So that is how I'm positioning something like that when I'm speaking to the seller. And there's usually no pushback, even if there's like 4 investors. I have a few partners, and they all want to see. Everybody's interested, but we they want to take a look. So is this day okay between this time to this time? And then we set up a walkthrough.
Perfect. Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate you answering that. I was just curious.
Yeah, no worries. And then it actually goes right into the buyer shall have the right. We now put 4 viewings, because if we get pushback, at least we get our 3. So typically it's the buyer shall have the right to view the property 4 times, property 3 further times prior to completion at a mutually agreed upon time, provided that written notice is given to the seller. The seller agrees to provide access to the property for the purpose of this viewing. So sometimes, they're like, no, 3's too many, but they also just don't really understand what we're asking. So again, it's more education. A lot of times they think, we ask for 15 days due diligence or conditional period. And it's not that we want to use all 3 of those viewings in that time, or all 4, but if I ask for 4, because 1 will be for photos to be taken, and now we have 3. If we have to do a walkthrough, now we have 2. And that's perfect, because if you're going to need an appraiser to come in, that's a visit. And if you can't coordinate that with the inspection happening on the same time, which doesn't often happen, those are the other 2 visits: inspection potentially, and or your appraisal. So we want to make sure we have enough visits to get into the property prior to close. So you want to let them know if closing is 2 months away, this is going to take place within the 2 months, not within the conditional period. Let them know you'll likely view the property once or twice before you lift the conditions, but you will need to be able to get in. So your professionals, whether a contractor, and as I said, inspector and appraiser can come in and view the property as well. And more times than not, they understand, and they don't really give you too much pushback.
Awesome. I love that. And then we have one last one there.
This is my go-to. This is my favorite clause. So I switched it up a little bit in the sense of the 24 hours. So I'll read it and tell you what I've put instead. So it says, this offer is subjected to further due diligence of the buyer at the sole discretion of the buyer for the benefit of the buyer for a period of, for us, we're asking for 15 days is what we start with, 15 business days. The seller agrees to provide documents pertaining to the property that are accessible to the seller and will cooperate and provide full access to the property. So instead of as many times as required within 24 hours, because they're going to be like, hell no, like what? They're not going to want that. So we just put, will cooperate to provide full access to the property with a 48-hour notice for the buyer to do his due diligence. This offer shall become null and void, and the deposit returned shall be returned to the buyer in full without deduction unless the buyer gives notice in writing that the conditions are fulfilled. So basically what this is saying is you can walk away from this deal for any reason under the sun. And why I also love it is because I don't need to also include a mortgage clause. I don't need to then say an inspection clause. Because if I'm a business, as we're purchasing these and putting out offers under the business name, why would it be dependent on whether or not we can get financing or a mortgage or, I find it just presents better without it. But this due diligence clause is like an umbrella for all of that. So you can essentially walk into the property and be like, oh no, they painted the walls red. Like, I hate that. I'm out for that reason. So I love the due diligence clause because it doesn't clutter and there's so much protection in there, as you see, like for the benefit of the buyer, for the buyer. It's really our clause. So honestly, guys, use this due diligence clause. It is my favorite. And as I said, it goes in every single offer that we put in. No need to have, the mortgage clause or anything else, or an inspection clause, because this kind of covers that. And it also covers the fact that, the seller agrees to provide documents pertaining to the property. So that could be, a zoning or retrofit that you're requesting. Maybe it's leases, maybe it's a tenant acknowledgement. So whatever documents you're requesting from the seller, they're obligated, once signing, to provide these to you if it's within their, possession within or before the 15 business days is up. Or let's say you lift conditions and they haven't given that to you as yet. I mean, you can kind of hold out and say, hey, we're waiting for, this document or these documents. So I love the due diligence clause for that reason. It just gives you ultimate protection and you can walk away for any reason under the sun.
Very, very interesting. I love it as well. I love that it's, kind of goes against the standard that's out there right now in terms of, financing and inspection or whatever. I had a property under contract. This is a few years back now. And this was like a property we were considering as a potential primary property. So it was a little different. Once we put an offer, we had it under contract, and we had a change of heart because we were thinking of moving in. It was a bit of a different process.
Right.
And we just literally had a change of heart. We asked to exit, and the realtor got really picky with us. And we had already done an inspection, and ultimately we were just claiming, hey, we didn't like what we found on the inspection. She's like, what about it don't you like? Like, I want to see the inspection report. I want to see what, and she pushed back on our reason to exit ultimately.
Right.
The two realtors had to have a really strong, heated conversation to get us out of the deal because she was just not happy with the whole situation. So this is awesome because it really resolves that, getting picky about what the reason you're exiting is.
Exactly.
The other thing that came to my mind is with the whole 15 business days, you give me the documents. We have used that clause to get us an extension before. Because it's like, hey, we waited 2 weeks. I still don't have documents. I can't do my due diligence. So you're going to have to extend,
Exactly.
From the moment that you give me the documents, then we need an extension to be able to do our due diligence. As well as even negotiating every time we have a property in the contract, we do our due diligence, we'll go back to the original agreement and say, hey, these are all the items that did not meet our original agreement. Because of that, we either need an extension or a reduction in price, or, we use this original contract to be able to negotiate something afterwards, because it's, there's so many moving pieces here, and that's exactly. Very helpful.
It's a great tool. And especially with what's going on now with, interest rates, and maybe sellers are like, well, do you qualify? Can you afford? I mean, for them to not have to see a mortgage clause, especially, I find that it gives sellers, because that's what I say. I talk to them on the phone and I say, hey, we do this every day. We're putting out offers, we're purchasing properties right across Canada. And you'll see in our offer, we don't have a mortgage clause, because financing is not something that we're concerned about. We definitely have the capital to close on this property. I'm more so concerned about performing our due diligence and making sure we cross all of our T's and dot all of our I's. And every time they're like, oh, wow, okay, no, that's great. It alleviates some of that tension, I guess, on their side, or some, skepticism even. And, it's a really, really great tool. So I highly recommend the due diligence clause. Exactly. And once you've done that, you have completed your first, agreement of purchase and sale document. And the more you do it, it just really becomes like second nature. You don't even think about it. You just get it done and boom. I remember the first couple times I would fill out these documents. It would take me like an hour each time. And that's probably because I was like listening to a video. I'm like, pause. Pause. Oh my God, it was torture. And now I'm just like flying through this thing. So
that's amazing.
Perfect.
That's a really good reminder that, in the beginning, it's always, there's this learning curve. But the more you do it, you get more comfortable doing it.
Absolutely.
And if you're going to be writing a lot of offers, having the ability to write your own agreement of purchase and sale is going to be massively beneficial to you. So this is a really great tool and information to have.
Absolutely. I agree.
Thia, this has been amazing. It was fun, first of all. Like, I like doing things that are fun. I always have fun with you, and we had a great conversation. I really appreciate your time and really valuable insights on something like this. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to take a lot of advantage of this today. I appreciate you. Keep on going. I look forward to staying in touch and seeing where you're up to, and let's do more of these with
I was just going to say, naturally the next document would probably be like an assignment agreement. So maybe we'll have a follow-up and go through the assignment agreement and what that looks like.
I love that. So let's get on the books. That's fantastic. I'm really wishing you a really great rest of your week. And we'll be in touch very soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Adriana. I hope you enjoy your evening as well.
Thank you. If you, I'm going to drop Thia's information wherever this goes, YouTube and some other places, so that you can follow her and follow her story and what she's up to. And I'll do the same. Feel free to subscribe, and we'll see you soon.
Perfect.
Bye.